right. Hey! Then the crowd goes wild. Oh man, it is absolutely Monday. Let me find my sound controls here. Yeah, there we go. It is boy, it's Monday. I keep feeling like every week is a whole month when I look back and I see all the stuff that we've been doing. But yeah, it's Monday. It's
It's a
definitely
hot and beautiful Monday.
it really is. It really is. As a friend of mine said, "Hey, it's gonna be cool, a cool 90 degrees." Oh, well, good day, and let's start our stream like we usually do, but this time it's updated with some new top sponsors, and we are excited to have a title sponsor as well. Arete has come in, their cybersecurity, and they have joined us alongside FPEA, who has been with us for a while, and Fisher Precious Metals, one of our, the family of one of our board members, came on as another one of our top sponsors. And it's the sponsorships that make this possible. The support that we get from all of the families that homeschool across Florida. Every little time somebody puts $5 here or there and they sign up for one of the supports, or some of the vendors that are on the recognition wall, it goes a long way. And our top sponsors are really the ones doing the heavy lifting here and making it possible for us to continue doing this work and providing the information and the content, and importantly the lobbying that we do each session. And there's a lot that goes into the behind the scenes, especially whenever we during out I think, Brenda, we have a call today even, uh, that we're going to have to jump on after this, where we'll be working on some things with collaboration with some private schools and some of the upcoming issues that we're all kind of trying to look and plan for, and get attention to. And
Actually, it's something that the UA families will be so
mm-hmm,
excited about that we've been working on for 3 years. And it takes sometimes a very long time to get attention, get the right
mm-hmm,
people in place. And it actually is a piece of legislation we're hoping to find a sponsor for to deal with the matrix levels that parents are having a difficult time getting through the school district. So that is exciting to me
mm-hmm.
since we've been working on it for so long. Now we've got more people chiming in than just us. So,
Right, yes. It's
yeah,
useful. It's very useful. um do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Maybe there are some people who aren't familiar with UA, or their first time parents, or who are looking into home education and the different options, or maybe they've just had PEP and they don't know what the other end of the homeschooling scholarships look like. Do you want to talk a little bit about what the matrix levels are?
sure.
Okay.
It's a very complicated process because it's part of a federal piece of legislation called IDEA, Individuals with
Mm-hmm.
Disability Education Act. And they set the broad rules for how it's going to flow down to the states. And then each state has to come up with their own rules that fall within the guidelines of the federal law. So it's very complicated. And when they did the last rule change, it took them about 5 years to get that in place because people were giving input, and then they make a change and they take it to the board and they get kicked back. And it just is a very long process. So our our issue with this is, and I worked very hard for a long time to get the FESUA in place. It was called the Gardner originally, and the funding was right out of the budget. And parents got more money initially
Mm.
from the budget, but we still didn't have in place any kind of variable for students who needed more services.
Mm.
The original legislation was just across the board a level 3. So, for those people that don't understand the matrices, There are 5 levels, and one is students don't need as many services. 5 is that they need a lot of services to be able to reach their full potential for education.
Okay. Yeah.
So in the Gardner, the legislature decided that they would just do everybody on a level 3,
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
and it came across in most districts pretty close to $10,000. It might have been 9,500 in some districts, but between that and $10,000. But every year they had to put more money and more money and more money. I'm talking millions of dollars into
Mm.
this program because it was so popular
Mm-hmm.
for parents who had children with disabilities. And and then in about 2018, I think, I'm not really good with years, but the legislature decided that they wanted to stabilize the program. There was such a demand for it, and they didn't want to have to keep putting millions and millions of dollars in the budget on a line item, meaning in a year it could be cut. So they may have 200 million or 500 million in the budget, but the next legislature would come back and say, oh, well, we want to take that money and put it in something else and cut the budget. And then there would be parents that would not get their full amount, or parents wouldn't get any at all. So
Mm.
the move to do it through the school district was good in terms of stabilizing the program and ensuring that it's going to be there for the next class and
Mm-hmm.
until students graduate at 22.
Mm.
However, that tied it to the school district's budget, and it reduced the amount of money that a parent got on a level 3 matrix
Mm.
to almost $8,000. So the parents who were in the program were able to retain the 10,000, but the new parents coming in were only getting 8. Well,
Okay.
$8,000 does not go very far when you're buying therapies for kids with autism
Right.
and
Yeah.
other disabilities. So I've always felt that was, and I really, really fussed about it at the time. You know, you're taking money away from these kids that really need extra help. And we as a state need to do all we can to help. But the legislature determined when they were doing the budget that that's all they were willing to do. So we started working hard, and I had, there were 2 or 3 years I had language that I was proposing in the budget. 2 years ago, we had some really good language that we were going to give each. Oh man, I just forgot it. There's one at most of the universities. It's a center, the CARD Center, Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, and they have
Okay.
psychologists there. And so we got in the last, I mean, it was the last week of the budget. We had Senator Stargell was head of the appropriations in the Senate. She had agreed to put $1 million in each one of the CARD centers to help get evaluations or IEPs for these kids so that they could get a higher matrix level. And then she asked, well, are the CARD centers willing to do that? And the lady that I was working with on trying to come up with the language called the CARD centers, and they said, no, that wasn't in their mission. They didn't want the $1 million. So it fell flat, even though we had everything in place. And that happens
Wow.
pretty often in the
Wow.
legislature. So anyway, then we were back to the drawing board. So last
Nice.
year we came with another concept that we were hoping would work, but there was not any interest by the leadership in the House to
Mm.
take the issue up. So we
Mm-hmm.
have different leadership coming in this year,
Right.
and we have a very supportive president coming in.
President of the Senate.
So we have a possibility that we can get it changed. The problem is when they're doing the evaluations for how many services the kids need in a school district, the way that it was changed back in about 2005, they changed it from the needs to RTI, which is response intervention in the classroom. So the school districts are like, well, we don't know how to judge this because the people that sit on the evaluation committee for an IEP are the child's school teacher, the school psychologist, and I don't remember the other positions, but they're all school related positions as designated by IDEA. So since our home educated students are parent directed educated, in this case, they would all be home educated because they have to register as home education students for FESUA. But they don't sit in a classroom. So the districts are like, we can't judge how a child would do if we gave them this particular therapy in the classroom because he's not sitting in the classroom. And so the districts are kind of at a loss. So we suggested that for some of the districts that have done a few of these, that if the child is getting ABA therapy or has a regular certified teacher that's coming in to work with the child, that they replace that person for the school teacher. And then if they have a private psychiatrist or psychologist working with the child, they can substitute the evaluations for the school psychologist. I actually got that in statute 2 years ago. The problem is that DOE has never sent out a technical assistance paper, which we, the group that's going to be meeting later today, has asked for and asked for and asked for, but they've had 3 turnovers in what they call the B's office. It's the Bureau of Exceptional Education Services.
Yeah.
They've had 3 turnovers and they just about get their feet on the ground, to do work, and then boom, it's somebody else there. So we've never been able to pull through, a technical assistance paper on that.
Yeah. I was actually talking to a friend of ours at church just yesterday, and she was talking to me about how where the department that she works in at the DOE, one of their supervisors just grabbed the coffee pot and walked out, never to be seen again. And I was like, oh, all right then. So that's how it goes. Duly noted. It must be. I bet it's like an episode of The Office or something around there. Sometimes where things.
I don't know.
You might wonder.
It's kind of bizarre because people just turn over, and the next thing you know, you're calling this person that you've worked with for all these years, and they're not there anymore.
They're not there. Well, that does bring us a nice segue into the other topic we were planning to talk about.
Wait a minute. Let me finish about the matrix level.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
So we're trying to find another pathway to be able to help parents with children with disabilities instead of going to their school district to go somewhere else. But it has to be a district program, something run by the state, because that's how the federal legislation is set up. So a child now that's getting $8,000, if in fact that child needs more therapies based on the chart it's a very complicated chart, but they have different modalities that they evaluate, and depending on what the bottom score is on all of those, they may be bumped to a level 4, which could be an increase of about $10,000. So it's a significant amount of money for those kids that need more services.
Right.
And we're fighting really hard when people say, oh, you only care about PEP parents. That's
Certainly.
not true. The
No.
problem we face is it's way more difficult to get money allocated and to find a way to make it
Hmm.
fit into the federal legislation so the state continues to draw down that money and doesn't violate their agreement with the federal government.
Hmm.
So it just takes time and people want it immediately and
It
it
does.
doesn't happen like that.
And there's a lot of moving parts in meetings and that happen behind the scenes up into. I don't think they hit the flashy moments in committees, at least not yet. And
Right.
so there's just so many things moving behind the scenes people don't know about, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to kind of expand on that so that people can see or at least get an idea of it, especially if they're able to share some of this. But let's see. Julie McCullough says, "Oh no, is an official retirement coming for Brenda?" Ha! Not yet.
I'm trying.
All right. So, talking about accountability, I am. You won't be able to see this because if I do a screen share for you, Brenda, and live, it'll mirror and it'll just mirror to infinity. So I want to avoid that, but I'll read it. I'll read it as we go because I had some interesting arguments with our friendly AI on homeschooling and accountability. And since we were talking about the DOE and talking about how things have to run, and you scratch your head sometimes wondering, are these the people that hold us accountable? Or where should accountability lie? Questions like that. So I'll just review a little bit about the conversation that I had. But I started by just asking AI, what do you think of homeschooling? Obviously, we know that AI doesn't think, it's a program, so it operates as programmed. But it goes, homeschooling is a big decision with pros and cons to consider. And it gives the proverbial, you get flexibility in time, but you're challenged with socialization. I actually have a different argument where I argued with it about the quality of socialization and whether, you know, being stuck in a room with 30 other children with your peers or being able to interact with a variety of humans throughout the day of varied ages and maturity levels was better. And anyway, well, that's for another video. um, it says ultimately homeschooling is a personal decision, weighing the benefits and challenges. And I then had said, there are certain associations, I'm not going to name them here, but it says there are certain, I offered this information. There are certain associations who want to limit homeschooling with oversight beyond what parents provide. They believe it's important that outside entities come in and take control of oversight for parents. Do you think this is in keeping with our Constitution, or it violates parents' freedoms and rights to direct the children as they see fit? And it says, well, I'm still learning. So I simplified the question and asked the part about oversight once more. And it says, well, this particular entity that you've chosen, they advocate for oversight, but not limitation. So we had to argue about what oversight meant and what limiting meant and what accountability meant. So we had to go back and define the terms in the question first. So we did. We talked homeschooling advocates. Many homeschooling families believe current regulations are sufficient and that increased oversight infringes on parental rights and educational freedoms. I do agree with the AI on that. Unfortunately, that's not what AI thinks. It's just reporting on what some people think. So we argued at length about the definition of oversight. And it says oversight and limitations are related concepts, but they have distinct purposes. Oversight is about monitoring and ensuring things are done properly. It's like having a supervisor who observes your work, makes sure that you're following guidelines, and offers guidance if needed. The goal is to maintain quality and prevent problems. Pay attention to this language because it's very important. Limitation, however, restricts what can be done. Imagine a fence around a playground. It keeps children safe by limiting where they can roam. And so they're advocating this particular entity is advocating for oversight, not limitation. So then I push back and I say, oversight is about monitoring and ensuring things are done properly. I'm using its own words. Quote, how do they ensure that things are done properly without limiting? Isn't the very act of, quote, ensuring things are done properly another way of saying limitation? And the AI goes, you're right. The line between oversight and limitation can be blurry. Here's how they can differ in the context of homeschooling. So it gives some examples. And I think I just skipped down through because it gives some examples. And then I just kind of ignore the examples and say, when you set standards, you're ultimately eliminating the freedom to choose something that lies outside of the standard. Correct? And I ended that with a question. So the AI agrees and says, that's a good point. Setting standards does limit choices to some degree. Here's a breakdown of the trade-off. Limitations of standards, reduced freedom, and potential rigidity. Maybe sometimes the standards are inflexible. The benefits of the standards are ensuring quality, promoting fairness, and providing guidance. Finding a balance, and it gives some tips and on and on and on. So I ignored the tips and all the other stuff. I'm very interested that it started to agree with me. So I comment back and I say there are indeed trade-offs with limitations, but that wasn't your original statement. So now I'm going back to the original statement. And I said, your original statement was that it's not limiting, just monitoring. And now you've recanted that statement and acknowledging that standards for monitoring is inherently limiting. And the AI goes, almost like slapping the forehead, because you're absolutely right. I misspoke initially. There is a definite overlap between oversight and limitation, especially when it comes to setting standards. Here's a more accurate breakdown, and it offers that pure oversight would involve simply observing homeschooling practices without imposing any requirements. Oversight with inherent limitations, most oversight involves setting some kind of standard, even if minimal. And then, so we go on, and I said, oversight is not simply observing. Oversight implies authority and the ability to impose an authoritative standard while watching to see if the standard is followed. And of course, AI then goes, you're absolutely right. I apologize for the previous mischaracterization. Oversight does indeed involve a level of authority and the ability to enforce standards. And it ultimately ends up agreeing with me. So I say the aforementioned association then therefore seeks to limit freedoms of parent-directed choices. And it says that's fair. That's a fair interpretation based on what we've discussed. This association's focus on oversight with standards does limit complete freedom parents have in homeschooling. And then it recaps and recants its original argument. This conversation took about an hour. But it was interesting to me because as AI gets more and more evolved and involved in things like search algorithms, finding content, looking for answers when people ask questions, and putting things in front of you. And hopefully we don't get any of our lawmakers who are leaning on any of this stuff to help write any of their bills, because it's very poorly informed and doesn't quite understand the definitions of terms. I think it's really important to remember that it's a program that operates, it's a very sophisticated program, but it's a program that operates as design. And then kind of segues into a conversation Brenda and I were thinking about having about accountability in homeschooling. I think that there's definitely a line, and the line has to be somewhere, right? We can't not have a line. Pure chaos and freedom and some order, or perfect order and absolutely zero freedom. Everybody does what they're programmed to do, like a program. So, specifically, you were thinking about taking the conversation in toward the direction of the kind of private school laws and the homeschooling laws that we have, and what the accountability, what is the situation of accountability that we have in the statutes so far?
Well, before we launch into that, I want to go
Okay,
back to
go
your
do it.
AI conversation.
Okay, okay.
Who were you talking to?
Google Gemini is the AI that I was discussing.
Okay, so you're talking to a computer that's been programmed by somebody with
Hmm.
somebody's opinion, right?
So yeah, so artificial intelligence algorithms are very sophisticated and they can update themselves. But what they'll essentially do is they operate from a base program, and then this particular one has access to internet search and capability, so it can gather additional information from sources that exist and kind of update itself. So it starts working as programmed, and then it can actually update itself as it gains new information. But there are pros and cons to that, because the what information it has access to sample informs it. And so that's a part of the part of the issue is how it's programmed, and part of the issue is the trend of thought that people publish and express that is sampled. Does that make sense? So
Yeah,
there's two things that
and
form it.
I was leading toward how
Hmm.
can our audience help change that perspective? Can we, and I don't know the answer to this,
Hmm.
but if there's a great article that they find on home education and how the results are, if they put that out there, where? On Facebook, um, on our
Hmm.
website, where would they post that kind of stuff so that as AI is collecting information, they're not only collecting information from the naysayers, but they're collecting information from people who have experienced positive results from home educating their children. Is there a way that would they pick it up off our website if people put
They
on our
can.
website, let me tell you about what we were able to
Yes.
do with my child?
Yes, and particularly in the forum. So it this particular one, there are many different AIs at this point, or there's a base learning language model, and it's been adapted by various entities, and so kind of each people are kind of crafting their own, so to speak, and doing various things with it more nuanced. Some of them can adjust video content and others cannot. Some of them will take the video content and the closed captions, and they'll use that as a source of the content. So when the video transcribes the closed captioning, it then turns into language and words that it can then parse. And then, of course, anything that's public facing. So it's not necessarily able to gain access to Facebook. I do believe that I think you can see Twitter without a login. Maybe you need a login to even see Twitter, see tweets. But the information that it has access to would have to be public information, not information that is accessible behind a paywall. And so things like our forum is a live, accessible, viewable information. In order for you to post, you have to log in. But in order to parse it or crawl it or read it, the search engine and the AI would simply need to view it. So blogging, our blog and our forum are useful places, and the forum in particular, because that's a place where families can actually post content themselves. Like parents can go and ask questions or put their story and testimony there to be used. I think that answered your question.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I know we've got some amazing stories from parents who, especially UA parents, who are home educators, that were
Hmm.
told your child will never walk, your child will never talk, your child will,
Right.
whatever, never
Yes.
succeed. You might as well
Yes.
institutionalize them. All of these things have been said, and these parents took it as a
Hmm.
challenge, and like, you're not going to tell me my child can't do that.
Right.
And then the amazing things that they do with these kids just gives me chill bumps,
Yeah.
because this is
Yeah.
an
It does.
untrained parent who
Hmm.
has just dug
Quote,
in and
untrained.
found what they
Yeah.
needed for their child. And
Right.
in the early days, they go, well, how are parents going to know what they need? I said, let me tell you, home education parents will find what their child needs. You don't have to worry about them. And it's so true. So, I would like for parents to start posting some of those things
Yes.
in our
It'd be
forum.
huge.
Not a 10-page,
Mm-hmm.
year by year blow, but
Mm-hmm.
where did you start and where did you end up? And what steps did you take that you were allowed to do in home education that they would
Mm-hmm.
not have gotten in a traditional setting? Um, I
Yeah.
just think there's some amazing stories out there
Oh, there
that
are,
we could
for sure.
re-educate AI, because if
Yes.
if people don't, and I'm not a big proponent. I mean, you got really into the AI bill, but I didn't even understand what the bill was about. So
Yeah.
I wasn't into the AI bill.
Sure.
But
Sure.
and I don't have an hour to sit around and argue with AI.
I
But
don't either.
I do feel like it's really important, based on what
Yeah.
you just explained,
It's critical.
that we share the positive aspects of parents being able to
Mm-hmm.
customize the education for their children and not be in a setting where there's so much oversight and so many standards
Mm-hmm.
that the child falls through the cracks. And that's what happens so many times.
I would say it's not only important, it's critical. It's vital because there are other articles. There are other places where people are writing. I saw one particular writer, I can't remember his name, Ryan something, uh, and there was I think Step Up for Students actually posted his article, and I read it, and I was immediately irritated because they use the word vouchers to describe the Florida programs, or sorry, the Florida scholarship PEP, and I was like, it's not it's not a voucher, it's not a pre-written script that you go and then exchange for this program, or exchange, like these are the choice things you can exchange it for and turn it in for, like, when you go to Chuck E. Cheese and you get the tickets, and then you take the tickets to the counter, and there's a select number of things you can exchange it for. It's a scholarship. It's a fund, and a scholarship fund, and that's money, scholarships to the child to be able to use for their educational benefit. I'm like, at the very beginning, we're starting to now use the wrong language to describe these programs. Well, then what happens when things like search results or AI or people go looking for things, and then it starts to just roll off the lips and it becomes, oh, it's a voucher program, but it's not. Even conceptually, when you get to then talking to the members of the legislation in front of committee, and they have a misconception about what it is. It's a slow building accumulation of poorly crafted thought that ends up leading the way, just with poor word choice. And I hate to say that. Like, it always irritated me whenever I would watch. I can't remember the movie or the story, but she was this taskmaster, and she would always like slap the ruler down and be like, precision of language, and that just, it was like nails on a chalkboard to me. But it is important. I'm not trying to be a language Nazi, but the words that we use matter, and when we don't define terms, what we're arguing becomes nebulous and vague, and more difficult whenever we want to hold a line on a particular freedom, or we want to people to understand what homeschooling is. Even just homeschooling, it was like earlier last or later last year, early in PEP, we had people within the community going, "Well, you're not real homeschoolers." Okay, but what is real homeschooling? Define that term. Are we talking about the legal term? Are we upset about like the legal path of home education, or are we just talking about the act of being at home with your kids and taking responsibility for their education? Which one? What are we talking about? So parent-directed education kind of emerged as a pivotal word that we start to use more because it's more descriptive of the function and form of what we're trying to protect, and it's just, there's so much involved in the conversation at large beyond Florida, and beyond like Florida law. It's important not to lose our anchor points and what that means, especially in assistive technologies. right? Assistive technologies are coming on board, and the amount of information that they can crawl in the blink of an eye is insane. Like it's truly perturbing. The key to remember is that they can only crawl what's publicly accessible. So that's one line that's really important to understand. But then also, like, what are the sources that it's going to be crawling? That one guy who wrote the article from Step Up ended up posting the exact same article in several different places. I found the same article posted a couple of days apart from that one at a different entity with some minor word changes, but he's like sold the article to several different places and he's making money, good for him. But it's just the proliferation of information is important. And I think that we need to understand how that works and harness it for the good of the home education families in Florida, because we can proliferate our own testimonies. And that's been one of the kind of heart and soul concepts behind the project, the Tell Your Story project that we started. Video is important because humans like video, but AI likes words. Because even whenever AI, these art generating AI, they're still using language models to convert into pixels. So they're using the language model. If you want to describe a red dragon with yellow glowing eyes, etc., it's going to know what those words are and then try to transcribe that into arrangement of pixels using geometry and math and where the colors go on a grid in order to develop the art. So it's a it's really interesting stuff, but ultimately it's a language model. So the language part matters. So any of the parents who are willing to put testimonies in our forum, that's also a great place to go. So that content and that language is publicly searchable and available and crawlable. And that's one of the reasons. That's another one of the reasons behind having started the forum. Not that this, I didn't even think we were going to talk about the forum today. So it's interesting that you
Well,
brought that up.
yeah, I also I think it's important for people to understand that there is a shift in people's thinking to some extent, because I know you read the same article and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but the article was about 5 school districts in Florida closing schools because they
Mm-hmm.
don't have students. Now, we know that there are a number of students coming in who are illegal coming into this country, and Florida
Okay.
law
Yeah.
requires the school districts to take those kids in and educate them. But at the same time, some of the largest school districts are losing students to the
Mm-hmm.
tune of numbers that require them to close schools. Where are
Mm-hmm.
these kids going? They're going into these scholarship programs, private school, parent directed education,
Right.
UA,
Right.
PEP, and it's making a dent in the public school system. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the thinking starting back in the 2000s when Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida. He wanted to give these poor students who live in these low income areas the same opportunities that parents that live in a different zip code have for their children. And it's working, and it
Mm-hmm.
is reaching what we call critical mass. So the thinking and the people that are criticizing the parent directed, whether you direct the education of your child into a
Mm-hmm.
private school of your choice, or whether
Sure.
you direct it at home in a home education program
Mm-hmm.
without state subsidizing your program, or you use the money that's allocated in a scholarship to help you purchase the items that you choose for your child to customize the education.
Right.
Parents are beginning to wake up, and they're
Yes.
realizing that they can do the job that they've been told for years.
That they can't do. Right.
You can't teach as well as the trained teachers.
Right. How
But
do you know? You're not an
COVID,
expert.
as bad as it was, as
Right.
bad as COVID was,
Yeah.
this was a good outcome from
Mm-hmm.
that, because parents began to see, they could do that job at home, and most of them felt they
Hmm.
could do a better job.
You know,
So
I think that when you consider what a teacher is up against with 30 children in a room and one parent or one teacher, one adult, you know, even if they have an aide, there's even if you're not looking at just look at the socialization for a moment. You have 30 children, 20 to 30 children.
let
Let's
me
be kind.
correct them. In Florida, it's not that many. It's more like
Right,
20 in the
20,
classroom.
yeah, 20 to 25, I think. I mean, I've seen some Title One classrooms that were packed. Like
Yeah,
I'm
I
not gonna
know.
point fingers, but yeah. When you think about it though, that child sees the exact same children every single day in those four walls, and the best you can hope for is that they don't get TikTok brain before they come home by 3 o'clock. From a social skill standpoint, like homeschool children can play sports and they can go interact with other children. They can they can have social activity and interactions. You can take them places. You can let them interact with people and curators and museums and other adults walking by, and there's the whole world is their classroom, not those four walls. They get exposure to anything you want to take them to get them exposed to. And it's odd to me that even AI would point out like, oh, the issues with socialization. I'm like, what? That my children talk to other adults and actually form bigger sentences and like I don't. What do you mean they don't have TikTok brain because they're like maybe we're out in the weeds or in left field here with the conversation, and I
I
should
don't
really.
know.
But
I think if anybody sees this as wondering about whether they want to home educate or not, just think about it. Children that are limited to a classroom all
hmm,
day, parents maybe are working.
yeah,
How many outside experiences do they have? That's one reason we
yeah,
chose the model, whatever you call it, our mantra, the world is our classroom,
classroom, yeah,
because if children don't have experiences, they don't get to see things, they
hmm,
have no framework upon which to build learning and education experiences. I was amazed a few years ago. I went during the summer to visit a senator over in the Jacksonville area, and he um, he just had a passion for uh, low income students, and he taught a Sunday school class of five fifth grade boys, and so during the summertime, on his own time,
hmm,
he organizes a field trip for the kids that lived in the projects.
nice,
So guess what? He took them to a river. Many of them had never seen the St. Johns River, and they live in Jacksonville.
wow,
They've never seen an ocean.
wow, wow,
I can't even
mm-hmm,
comprehend people living in Florida and being so limited, because we took our kids everywhere.
yeah,
Everything was education,
yeah,
museums, the beach, collecting seashells, studying about what's in the ocean and the habitats, and
certainly,
everything was a learning experience.
certainly,
But if you don't have that framework and you have
mm-hmm,
no idea what an ocean is or a mountain, just some of the basic stuff that we take for granted,
yeah.
how are those kids going to build on that for future? So, you know,
And I'm pro homeschool, obviously, because we homeschool our children, and I'm not trying to cram homeschooling down anyone's throat, but parent directed freedoms. The freedom for the parent to direct the education as they see fit. That's what we stand on, right? And you said it earlier, wherever the parent directs them. I know that I was listening to in Mariana earlier this week or last week. I My timeline is fuzzy, but the event was not. They were going through a myriad of options of how you can homeschool and like what you could choose to do and how you could choose to do it. Everything from completely unschooling and letting your children run wild and letting them be the teacher and you just pour information in as they grab things they're interested in, to classical education and a very strict regimen and diet of of books that aren't twaddle, and all kinds of other stuff. Like there's a whole there's a whole bunch of curriculum options and everything in between, and you can do it without money. We have for the whole time until we decided to take PEP, just did it on shoestring budgets and borrowing here and taking kids there, and whatever,
Libraries.
yeah, whatever free experience we could take the kids to go be a part of. And yeah, the money is helpful. PEP is wonderful. It's enriching what we're able to put in front of our kids and offer them, but it isn't necessary, you know. And I don't want people coming from a broken system to look at home education or their options as a parent and think that it's cost prohibitive. In a lot of ways it is, because it's going to cost something. I think whenever I do counseling with, or mentoring, excuse me, with kind of young boys and they're in a transitional phase in life, I always like to tell them that they can have anything that they want, but they have to understand what it's going to cost them and be willing to pay the cost. Right? That's critical. If they don't understand what it costs them, then at some point they'll be surprised and confronted with that sacrifice. And then they might suddenly want to bounce or bail. But if they understand the cost and they determine to pay it, then when it comes, it's just been budgeted for, right? Like
Right.
less time for myself to play video games, less time for, but I'm walking with my kids outside. I'm teaching them how to get under a pop fly of a baseball and where to look for the right kind of lizards under rocks or on rocks, or what kind of critters hide over here, and the importance of, just there's so many different things about nature and life. I think education ultimately comes down to teaching children how to learn and how to be critical in their mind, right? To develop a deeper understanding of the things around them. The world has a never-ending supply of content to throw at them their whole
That's right.
life.
And so they, people say, well, are they learning the same thing as school? Well, maybe
Who
not,
cares?
but how are you going to teach them
Yeah.
all the facts that are
Yeah.
out there? You can't.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so which selected facts are
Yes.
you going to teach your kids? I'd rather for history to live in a period of history and learn what the thinking was at that time and why they did what they did and what they ate and who they knew and who were the artists and all of that, so that they get a rich and enriched idea of history rather than what happened in 1776 and 78. I mean, memorizations
Yes.
of date never did much for me. I could memorize the dates, but I had
Yeah.
no concept of history. And the
There's
same
a.
thing with games for math.
Mm-hmm.
People are just so stressed. Well, I think the math system in public schools is totally backwards because they start kids out writing figures, which are numbers. Kids have no idea what a 5 is. But
Yeah.
if you start off with letting them play with objects and you count the objects, we had them
Mm-hmm.
playing games and then they started adding up, the objects. And my daughter was playing with dominoes one day after we played dominoes. And she goes, "Look, Mom, if you take the 1 from over here and put it over here with the 9, that makes 10." And I said, "Yeah, that's addition. That's what we call addition." it,
Yes.
there's
Yes.
this neat book I
Yes.
read after we had been doing that with our kids, and we never even had a math book until they
Mm-hmm.
started in algebra. And I just
Yeah.
handed them the Saxon book and the answer key and the
Mm-hmm.
the solution manual. I said, "Be done by the end of the year." I mean, that's how I
Sure.
taught math. And
Well, one of my favorite quotes is Henry Adams, and he says, "There's nothing in education as astonishing as the amount of ignorance it accumulates in the form of inert facts." And
that's
I
true.
I
Wow, I love
love
that
that.
too.
I love that quote. Love it. Because it's true. Like we get the this idea that, like, oh, I have to cram all this information into my kid's head and they have to retain it, and it's like, no, the world is full of information. Teach them how to think. Teach them how to
Find
get
it.
under something. Teach them, yeah, how to search when they want to go searching, and how to be efficient and finding that information or parsing it or sifting between what's valid and invalid to move to the next point, things like that. Oh, Deline
How to
Howell
apply
says,
facts to life,
how to apply it. Yes. Yes. Deline says, this goes back to the cost, but she chimed in. I love you, Deline. Thank you for being here. She says it costs parents when they send their kids to institutionalized schools too. We were spending approximately $700 a year on each kid, special clothes, classroom, individual supplies, field trips, etc. That's a great point. It does have a cost financially and emotionally and mentally. There are pros and cons to all. There are costs. And I think that if I had an encouragement to offer to people considering their options for where they can direct their children for their education, whether it's to be at home, to learn this curriculum or that curriculum or private school, that they count the cost and think carefully about what those are and choose what they think is going to set the child up best for success in life. So, well, we do have to get going. We have to get on. I didn't imagine our conversation was going to go this way.
I didn't either, but it was fun.
It was fun. I'm actually impassioned and excited. But we do have to hop on the other call because we have to go collaborate with some others. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for being here watching today. We really appreciate your time and attention. Love this topic. Consider the cost. Yes. Thank you for chiming in. And we see you, even if you're a lurker and you're lingering, or if you're watching this afterwards, we appreciate you. Help us share the content and share the information. I'm going to go ahead and get these up on YouTube and Rumble. So if you find it easier to share them from YouTube or Rumble, probably within the hour, I'll get them up. And then we're moving into our new home up in Tallahassee. We have found roots, and we are planting. There's just a lot of cleaning to do with this particular place. So it needs a lot of love and care, and that's where we're at right now. Brenda, do you have anything to add before we call it a day?
Well, I think we should give them as an assignment, and that is
Yes.
please share your testimony in the forum.
Yes. Yes, please. Yeah, if you take nothing away from the video other than that, do that. Do that. Share it, tell us a little bit about why you homeschool or home educate and what it looks like for you, maybe a unique challenge, and then very specifically tell us the impact that you feel that's had on your family and share that with us. And we look forward to cheering you on from the sidelines as you all express the differences and the nuances and the variety of your own home education paths. All right. Well, we're going to hit our top sponsors and our title sponsors one more time. We want to thank Arete and FPEA and Fisher Precious Metals for being our top sponsors. FPEA has been with us for quite some time, and we're welcoming Arete and Fisher, especially Arete as our title sponsor. We're so excited to have them come on board, help us find stabilization so we can keep doing all of this as we move forward. And we thank all of you for being loyal listeners and watchers and helping us share information. And without further ado, we will let you guys have your Monday back, and we hope you enjoy it.